How you doing out there, folks? My name is Frank Leeper, and you've probably seen a lot of my videos I've been posting lately. And the last thing I've been mentioning that I think that my mother was the first female Capone. She was born in 1910. She was in show business with my father. They worked in Chicago and all. So if the time frame is correct, that she was there at that time. So we go back when I was a kid, that all she talked about was show business and all about Al Capone. And she said, oh, he was really good to people. He used to line up the kids and give them money, buy them ice cream, and he opened up the soup kitchens. We all know about some of this stuff. And I didn't think much of it, but she talked like if she was related to him. I'm only a kid now, remember. When she was doing all this, I was about young. I was pretty young, so I didn't mention too much. And she even told me that she gave him a nickname. I said, what was it? She called him Storky. Storky? I said, yeah, because he was a flashy dresser. He liked that name, Storky, but he didn't like Scarface. I mean, some of the stuff she said sounded like she was there. I know she was there at that time period because she worked there in the show business. So we go back, let's see. They came to New York, Al Capone's family, before he was born. So did my mother's family came to New York around that time period. So she could, and she was neighbors with them, evidently, from what she says. And I come up with the scenario that, from what I read, I mean, I read a few books back, a while back. One of the authors distinctly says that the first female Capone was born in 1910 and died in 1910. So I started saying it's just that was all there was. There was no more. I kept reading different books. Another book said that this Rosa was born in 1910 and went on to live a life, family. Have a family and everything, and grow old and all. And she married a gangster named Frank. Now, my mother married a gangster. The name Frank? No, I don't know if my father was a gangster. He could have been. So as this story goes on, I'm doing all this research. And then I read in another book where it says that when Al Capone was in prison in the 30s, that the mother and the two daughters, Mafalda and the other one. So what's the other one? The other one was Rosa. They're supposed to not be alive. So that's my mother. Well, I don't know. I know that some of the things fit and some don't. My mother and father were both in show business, so that they were there. They were there during that time period. I know that. But according to, I'm trying to figure it out. I thought Al Capone had something to do with it, like a cover-up of that, but no, I don't think so now. Because he was only be 11 years old in 1910, so maybe the family decided they didn't want her to grow up in that environment, and I think maybe they gifted her to the Serpi family. That's my mother's name of a family. If they gifted her at that time, they had a big family, so they gifted her to that family, so she grew up with them. So that was one of the theories I had also, and that would make me, I guess, related to them that way. And she would have been the first female Capone, and she could have lived her life, and she was in show business and all. I know I have pictures, I have a lot of pictures. Well, not a lot, but the ones I have are I think the important ones that tie this in a little more. I have a picture of my father standing on the porch of Al Capone's house. Now, it doesn't say in the photo I have, it doesn't say this is Al Capone's house. But I looked up pictures online of his house. They show it. It was on Prairie Street, I think in Cicero. Or whatever it was. I'm not sure Cicero. I know it was in Chicago. So I looked closely at it, and the porch it matches. I mean, it shows the the 2 flower pots, one on each side, and my father standing there. And was my father a bodyguard for Al Capone? It could have been. That means he could have been a gangster. He was in show business too. That doesn't mean nothing. It's like a side job, It's like extra, extra money. So that's another thing. And then some of the things my mother said. My mother said that Al Capone paid for their wedding. Italian wedding, they're big back in the day. He wasn't there, of course not, because it would have been too dangerous for him to pop up there to take a hit on him. Right at the wedding. He didn't want to do that, create a scene. So he paid for everything, and I have a picture of my mother and father, a big picture of her with a long dress, gown that has that trailing on, and he's standing there direct up. It's hard to say, about the age, back to the age again. Here's where there's a part that's not fitting exactly. It's hard because there's no documentation for me to really look at. Okay, my mother was born in 1910. My father would have been, he was 10 years older than her. So if that means in 1930, when they worked the World's Fair, she would have been, 20, which is about right. But he's still older than her. But she was born in 1917, because that's when my mother said she had 2 different birth dates. If she was born in 1917, she would have only been, the World's Fair was 33. She would have only been 16 in 1933. It's kind of young. She could have got permission from her parents, to work. But they got married around that time. So they didn't have to worry about it. My father didn't have to worry that she's so young to be going with her. So that's why they got married. So that part fits, and I don't know, the dates there, that part is sketchy. But again, like I said, I have these different theories about it, that my mother really could have been the first female Capone. And then the second female Capone was born in 1912. And she also grew up and married she married the brother of the one that Rosa was supposed to marry. There's brothers there, right? The gangsters, they were brothers, and she married one brother, and then Rosa married the other one. So I don't know how she could be doing this if the one account in one book says that she was born in 1910 and died in 1910 plus. I looked it up online, like the family tree, and it shows Rosa. It says Rosa, and it hasn't born in 1910 and died in 1910. So it's showing that. But I know my mother didn't. I know that. So my mother and father both worked in show business during all the time they were together. So they worked in the 1930s. After this, and Al Capone went to prison because my mother and father both worked in 1933 Chicago World's Fair. Al Capone was in prison then. That's why they were so important that they got him to get him in prison, because they didn't want him to run, because I think Prohibition was repealed, and so he wouldn't be having all the booze and the girly shows and everything going on. At the World's Fair, he'd be running everything. So that way they didn't want him, because it could have ruined everything, with all the gangsters there and everything and all that going on. He would have made it into a big business, out of it. So that was one of the reasons why they were so concerned to get him out of the picture then. They didn't want that World's Fair to be ruined. So then my mother did work it. So there's a whole bunch of things there that I trying to put it together. I have the different scenarios that I come up with to see what fits, Okay, so my mother and father, my father, he was a barker in the sideshows. He was a song and dance man. He made it. He was in the stunts in movies, and I think my mother said that he was a double in the movie The Unholy Three. He doubled for Francis X. Bushman. That's what she said. I mean, my mother said all the things, and and that's what they were doing. And my mother, she was a lot of things, and because they called her, she said that her name, they called my mother the charisma kid of the 1930s. I know, how come I don't see nothing like that, Anyway, I couldn't find nothing about it. I mean, I looked online. I looked up the Italian village at the World's Fair, and there's just a clip, and she's there, standing there. I know my mother when I see. I have pictures of her when she was younger, and she's standing there in the doorway where this exhibit is, this Italian village, and she was Italian, so, and she's standing there. I got a picture of her there. That was online. The other pictures I have a picture of my mother. She gave me the two pictures small pictures of her, and she wrote on the back of each picture, what it was. One is just she was a stripper in the World's Fair. I think it was the Chicago World's Fair. And she's the picture of her. She's nude except she has a G-string on. And then she was another picture she showed that she's wearing Arabian. She was an Arabian dancer probably in another exhibit, and her name was Nubia in that one. So she played a lot of different things, did a lot of different things, and it was into the 30s because, like I said, the Chicago World's Fair. Then in 1937, she did the Toronto Motordrome as a stunt rider on a motorcycle. I have a picture of that. Where she's on the platform there on the stage, and it shows it. It shows the sign right above that, and I couldn't find nothing on that either. And I have a picture of her on a motorcycle. That when she was doing stunt riding, she was riding up and down a wall, and she got injured once. She told me that she broke both ankles. Well, that was it. And she got back on the motorcycle and she finished the act. The show must go on, as they say. That was that. And she did other things. I know all the things. She worked circuses, carnivals, sideshows, and so did my father. And she was a barker, on those shows. And she was also told me she worked in another, I think it was Coney Island. She worked in the show, the Olga the Headless Girl. It was a big thing then. It was a big illusion or whatever it was. And she said she was the nurse. Now I looked it up online, and there's a picture there of her as the nurse. I recognize her, and I have a picture of her. That same picture. I have a picture of her that she gave me, where she's the nurse, and she told me that it was done with mirrors or however they did it, and that she was the nurse and then sometimes she played Olga. So that's another thing. That if this, what I say about, my mother being the first female Capone, look, it's still a story there about their show business career that, it could be written also that I would like to see recreated. But back to this again, about all the things that I've been saying about this first female Capone. Okay, now if they came to America, the Capones and the Serpis, and say, my mother's mother was Al Capone's mother's sister. So they lived nearby, and they both came to New York, where they, were living near one another, then moved to Chicago. As friends, family. That maybe that Al Capone's father could have made my mother's mother pregnant, and that's how she became related, that way. And she grew up with them. But again, all this stuff, I don't know what can be proven. I know if a DNA test on me might prove that I'm related somehow. So that might be able to create the story better from that. Because I know Deidre Capone, she's a little older than me now. She's around 80. I'm in my 70s, and I think she's been writing a lot of books about it lately, and she's been interviewed and all. And all her concern is to prove that Al Capone was not the bad guy they said he was. That he did the things, but he was also helping a lot of people. He was a family man and all that. I agree with it because I know my mother said it. That she, that he was doing all these things. And that he was a family man, like that she says. That he didn't, like he told my mother said that Al Capone told her, because she said she saw him all the time, that he told her that if they don't mess with me, I don't mess with them. So, this is the thing that sounded right, about all this. But I'm really looking for somebody. That's a reporter, a newspaper reporter, will say, magazine that writes articles, or someone that might be an expert in this kind of thing, in the gangsters and all that time period, that might want to look into it, But again, it would change history, because the history is saying, in the books, it says this first female Capone, Rosa, she was born in 1910, and she died in 1910. So now, if she didn't, and my mother was the first female Capone, well, okay, back to the pictures again. So I do have some way, maybe the pictures could help put the story together. Okay, like I said, I have a picture of my father. He's on the porch of Al Capone's house. I studied it, unless it could be proven wrong. So that means he was there then at that time period, and I know he was, and my mother too. So if that's one picture. I have a picture of my mother with this Olga the Headless Girl exhibit. I have that picture. Okay, my father worked with Frank Buck in Frank Buck's Jungle Land at the World's Fair. Frank Buck, he was the one that brought him back alive. All the animals, he was bringing them back. He used to catch them and all and bring them back. That was his big thing. So my father was an animal trainer. And since his name was Frank also, he changed his name to Jack. Because they both, same name, Frank. He holler Frank, and they didn't want to have a problem with it. They didn't want to take the fact that confused him and think he's Frank Buck. So he changed his name to Jack after that. So that I know about that. And see what other possible pictures there. Well, the wedding picture I have, you can tell by looking at the wedding picture that it was a big wedding, just by the way my mother was dressed and all. So I got a lot of things there that's why I need someone that knows about that time period, that could verify, what I'm saying, I don't know what else I could say about it. I mean, I've been posting all this stuff. Because one of the videos I posted, they were saying that in 1920 that Al Capone's father died, right? And that he's going to work with his brothers and all to take care of his mother and sisters. It didn't say sister, it said sisters. But there's another thing that even in that show said that. So they're proving that there was two. That there was a first female Capone and a second female Capone. So it's just that I don't know why there wasn't too much documentation about that. But and my mother, the way she was saying these stories, I grew up listening to it and all, and like when she got older, she didn't say no more about it. I don't think she wanted me to know about it, for whatever reason, I know Italian, and I know that my mother is from Naples, because she took me and my brother to Italy, I think 1956, to meet her grandfather. He was over 100. And we landed in Naples, and we had to take a horse and a buggy to get to this little town. It was Cosenza in Italy, to see him, she wanted to see him. So that part, then we came back and all. But again, this whole story, that my mother was telling me through the years as I grew up. And she told me she went to Al Capone's funeral. That was in 1947. And that, she was so sad about it because he wasn't that old. And I mean, I didn't hear about this. But remember, I was born in 1946. I was born in August of 1946, and this was in January of 47. So I didn't know about it till, I guess, 12 years later or something, when she was telling all the stuff that she went. She left me. I was only a baby with the father. And she went there, and it was really cold that day. It was in Chicago at Mount Carmel Cemetery, and the family was there, and some of the gangsters, and it was pretty big. Not downtown downtown. He means at the grave site there. He has a big marker with all the family there. I wonder if there's a grave there for Rosa. I just thought of that now, that all of them are there, all the brothers and all that got killed, and Al Capone. I think the mother and father, but I wonder if there is, because there should be. He's born in 1910 and died in 1910. I mean, so there's another one. Maybe there could be, but it won't say 1910 and died in 1910. It's going to say 1910 and died in, 1980. Because when my mother passed away, since there was no birth certificate, it said in the obituary, it said that she died in 1987. It said she was 77. It's back to the 1910 again. There's a lot of things here that need to be. I want to resolve this, either way, and I want closure on it, from all the things that I've been saying. I mean, I posted all those videos, but again, in the description, you're reading all this stuff, but I'm saying it now. You're seeing me talking to you, and I want someone to maybe contact me about it. Because even if we prove it that I'm not related, fine, I'm satisfied with that. I want closure, and I won't have no doubt in my mind, but there is a question, with all the things that I've been coming up with. There is a question, and the question is, was she the first female Capone or not? Because remember, she came to Philadelphia in the 1940s, and she worked. The reason she came to Philadelphia because there was a Troc burlesque theater, and she was doing dancing, and my father was announcing the shows. So that connection there, and there's another connection. My brother was born in 1944, and he also died at birth. Not at birth, I think he lived 5 days. So he was born in 1944, and he died in 1944. Now I was born in 1946. 2 years later, Rosa Capone was born in 1910, died in 1910, and her sister was born 2 years later in 1912. But that can happen. It just seems there's another coincidence there, but again, I would like someone, I don't care, even if you're not a reporter or a writer or nothing like that might be interested in the story. Because remember, whatever happens, if it is true, whoever is involved is going to be a big story. A big scoop for a newspaper or for a magazine or something. Those papers that write about that National Enquirer, they write about things. Remember they said Elvis was alive and he was working in Burger King in Kalamazoo. They come up with all these stories. They might be interested in doing something on it. So I'm just looking to try to see if I can get this resolved, I know the DNA part, again, that might prove it, because if that comes up and I match, like this Deidre Capone, if she wants to even do it, I don't think she does, because I did contact her and she didn't answer me. But I think she thinks she knows it all, because she lived it and all, and she's telling all about it. So she's not mentioning nothing about the first female Capone. She's not mentioning that. She's not mentioning her interviews because it doesn't come up. It's not something that I'm coming up with, something that's a whole different thing completely of everything else that's written about Al Capone. Again, I want to thank everybody for listening to this. This time I decided to tell you face to face and not posting the videos and not writing all that description I write, because I think a lot of people don't read it. So if anybody's interested in this, I want to give my email address, so you can email me. I know you could go through Twitter or YouTube. They would give it to you either way. But it's frankleeper46@gmail.com. So if anybody out there wants to contact me about it, I'll be glad to talk to you, and maybe we can figure something out here, I thank you for your time, and have a great day.